Hey, thanks for coming and checking me out. Hi, my name is Supe, and it's been quite the adventure getting to today, and I hope you've enjoyed your adventure getting to where you are today as well. When I last did a video, I was getting ready to go in for surgery, and really simple procedure, nothing too crazy. And I was going to do a little follow-up on the surgery and stuff, but really it was so uneventful that it didn't really feel like anything to delve into at the moment. But here we are, a week or three out from that, and I gotta say, there was more to it than I first thought. There was more to this healing process than I first expected. And I think that's something that a lot of people can understand, is the healing process of your body or your mind can really be subtle. The little bit of things that go on in your physicality and your mentality are really so slight. And it takes so long, and you get so used to what's going on that it's hard to overlook it. But it's also incredibly easy to overlook it in the moment. So much happens, it's easy to overlook. The changes that occur in your body when you're healing are they're always unique. And even if you've healed from something that you feel is similar, this is a different time. Your body is different than it was the last time that you did any sort of healing. And it's really interesting to think about the changes in our bodies and the normalcy that we understand as our body changes. I had a friend tell me one time that they were starting to work out, and they did a lot of research on how the body changes. And the one thing that they really were holding on to was the notice of other people and how other people notice the changes in your body, and how somebody who hasn't seen you for a long time, somebody who I don't see very often, would notice smaller changes because longer ago I looked more different. The aging process unto itself does things to your physicality. And as you work out, somebody who hasn't seen you as much will notice the slight changes more pronounced. And the people that you see more often, it will take longer for them to notice those changes because the changes have to be more significant. They have to be more drastic. And that's a very interesting thing to me, is that somebody who sees me all the time, their vision of me grows with me. If I'm working out and I'm getting bigger shoulders or bigger arms, which I'm not at the moment, but it would be easier for somebody who I hadn't seen in, say, a year to see me and notice these small changes in my shoulders or my arms or my neck. And somebody like my roommate wouldn't really start to see the impact of those changes much at all. They would be very used to watching my body progress. And somebody, say somebody who lived in my house, who I see maybe once or twice a week, it would take 5 or 6 or 8 weeks for them to notice the changes in my physicality because they're used to seeing the changes occur, which is, it's an interesting thing, because not much in nature other than those specific circumstances of physical changes happen in such subtle ways. But one of the things that really interests me that I've been reading about is the impact of poisons on our body. Of course, with the things going on in 2020, a lot of intellect has been poured into how our bodies work and how our bodies process things and the way that we react to certain things, viruses and bacteria and all sorts of stuff. But really, I found one of the most interesting things to be how fungi impact us, and how impactful fungi are on our everyday lives and the things that happen around us all the time, and the ecosystems that are impacted by them. Fungi is kind of the guide and the blueprint to so much that happens in the world. And there's so much about fungi that we don't understand. The fact that it travels the way that it does, how spores ride in the air and go through the ground and attach themselves to surfaces and become part of other things, is very interesting. The symbiosis of the things in the world, specifically fungi to plants, is really interesting. And a great example of the symbiosis of fungi to plants are the death cap mushrooms. And the death cap mushrooms, they were really just a pocket of these fungi in the world. They look fairly harmless. They look almost appetizing. You can eat them and not understand that they're poisoning you, and their effects on the body are subtle and then not instantaneous, but very quick to act. And that little pocket of this certain fungi has now started to spread all over the world in huge, huge amounts, where these death cap mushrooms can be found everywhere. I believe they originally started in Europe somewhere, and now you can find them in Canada and America and inside the tropics. They're everywhere. And because they're fungi, they can proliferate in very unspecific environments. They just need a moment of the right conditions to be able to flower and come out of the ground as the mushrooms that we see and we know and can recognize. They can lay dormant for years and years and years until the conditions are just right for them to come out. And so what's happened is these European trees that have this symbiotic relationship harbor these underground spore mycelia. I don't really know specifically. I've only read so much, and I don't want to be sticking to the paper so much. But they can lay dormant in the root systems of transplanted trees. And as we move these transplanted trees around the world to make our yards and our neighborhoods look more beautiful, the little tiny pieces of these fungi just lay dormant until the conditions are just right, when they spring forth and create these mushrooms. And these mushrooms are deadly on a level that is almost grotesque. They kill so many people compared to some things in this year, maybe not as deadly as what we're dealing with in 2020, but they're very deadly in comparison to other edibles, other things that we ingest, and they're getting out of control. They're encroaching on all sorts of ecosystems, and they're starting to make themselves at home there, and they're finding broader and broader spectrums of environmental conditions to be able to come out and show those mushrooms, and children and unknowing foragers pick these and serve them or eat them inadvertently and become incredibly sick, and a lot of them have to get transplants so that they can survive, and a lot of them don't survive. It's scary that all of these things that are trying to kill us are around all the time. And these death cap mushrooms don't give us any chance to fix it. With metal poisonings and other things that get into our bodies, a lot of times you can survive these things as long as your body can process these things out. You're going to be okay. But these death cap mushrooms aren't so friendly. Really makes it kind of hard to survive. The worst part about them is that when you first eat them, they can taste nice. They can taste like a mushroom should, and you don't understand that what you're eating is in fact a poison, and that in a few days' time your innards, your guts, are going to start to shut down. They just can't process what these death cap mushrooms create in your gut. It's interesting. Such a small thing can affect you so greatly. There's places in the United States that have recently decriminalized drugs and on a very broad spectrum, and another state has decided to use psilocybin, the magic mushrooms drug, in more therapeutic stances. And it's theorized by some people that magic mushrooms, the psilocybin, is possibly one of the reasons why we have spoken language, why we communicate as humans the way that we do. And it's amazing to me that something like a fungi can both be so incredibly deadly or so integral to the advancement of humankind. The death cap mushrooms are spreading all over the world. But these psilocybin mushrooms come in so many different forms that in multiple pockets around the world, around the same time, inside of the same millennia, at least, maybe inside of 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 5,000 years, maybe less even, maybe even just a couple hundred years, we're not totally sure. It started to advance our brains in the same way that the invention of fire started to advance our brains. There's also theories about, the introduction of different DNAs and interbreeding programs and all sorts of very interesting, if nothing else, theories on how humans became so human. But understanding what a fungi is and how it works and how things like mushrooms spread so easily, it just seems like one of the more likely theories to me. Our body healed itself, utilizes this poison of psilocybin to create things in the mind to be able to survive beyond the poisoning. And the more psilocybin you take, the more your body becomes used to it, like a lot of ingested things, which is ultimately really interesting to begin with. It also makes me think about something else. We just had one of the fall holidays, the last of the fall holidays, really. We just celebrated Thanksgiving in the United States. I'm in New England. I'm in one of the areas that, at least close to, where the first Thanksgiving occurred. It was originally a 3-day celebration, they say. A feast that was about sharing, and there was all sorts of underlying malice inside of it. There was so much that occurred in the Thanksgiving story that we don't really celebrate today. Our history is kind of rolled over it, very much like a body healing a scar. My surgery scar looks nothing like it did the day after I was cut open. It's actually quite unassuming now. It's long, but it's not deep. It doesn't look like it hurt that much anymore. And I feel the same way about Thanksgiving. It doesn't look like it hurt that much anymore. But there's a lot of things that went on with that first Thanksgiving feast and the subsequent ones that occurred right after it. But one of the things that they did eat at the first Thanksgiving was fungi. It was one of those things that was easily foraged and still is in this area of the world. And a lot of people enjoy, I see it on my Facebook timeline a lot, mostly in the early fall, enjoy foraging for fungi and eating and preparing it in crazy, awesome different ways and taking that nature's bounty and utilizing it for our own nourishment. And that was a part of that first Thanksgiving. But back then, there were no death cap mushrooms around here. What did it take to understand what kind of things you could eat in nature so long ago? The transfer of knowledge between people, specifically between the pilgrims, the people who came here from Europe, and the indigenous people here in North America, and the exchange of information that occurred, making it apparent that there were things that you could eat here. What were those things? What made them different from the things that you couldn't eat? What were the familiar things that you definitely couldn't eat but in North America, but you could in Europe? And what were all those things that were set at the table? We all know the tradition in North America of eating turkey. And one of my favorite things to listen to as a kid was The History of the United States Part 1 by a person named Stan Freberg. And one of the jokes in there is that originally the turkey was meant to be the national bird because there's so much of it around New England that you see it everywhere. It was kind of the face of New England. And the bald eagle was supposed to be this very special thing that was going to be brought to the table at Thanksgiving, and the chef accidentally cooked the wrong bird. And so it became tradition to eat the turkey and idolize the bald eagle, when originally we were supposed to eat the bald eagle and idolize the turkey. See a lot of friends on social media posting about the turkeys wandering through their yards. Even up until now, I don't know where turkeys go in the winter, so I suspect it happens all year round. But in the early spring, I always see a lot of turkeys. Maybe the bounty of turkeys in this area made it easier to eat them, but it's very unlikely that there was a lot of turkey at the first Thanksgiving. It's very likely that there was a lot of bird. It was very easy to find things like pigeon. There were a lot of what we would now call homing pigeons, undomesticated homing pigeons, or messenger pigeons, as they were called. Now mostly extinct, to my understanding, but they used to be so crazy abundant in this area that you could shoot in the sky during a flock of them and knock down 200 of them. So it's very likely that we ate a lot of that. We ate a lot of corn, maize, and they definitely made bread out of maize. They probably had onions and carrots, different types of vegetables. And all those things were brought to the table. They were joined together in a feast that was bringing together communities of these indigenous people and these colonizers from Europe. Colonizers who were starving in the middle of the woods. They were hurting. And this other group of people helped them heal by helping them find bounty in their food. And I find myself healing from food a lot. I know it's easy to picture healing from food, at least for me. Understanding that what I eat is becoming part of me. You know, you are what you eat. But the things that I ate right after my surgery were very important into making sure that I healed quickly and efficiently. And not shortly after my surgery was Thanksgiving. I spent it in here. I did get some food from my family, but because of the fact that I had just had surgery and the fact that there's some craziness going on in the world, we did decide to stay isolated and not share the dining table with the people in my family. But we shared the food. The food was given to me. And I brought it home and put it on my table and ate it. And helped heal myself. I was growing. I was growing pieces of skin back together. I was growing my mind back a bit. The craziest part about all of it is that I feel with that surgery, I did have some healing in my mind. Fixing part of my body that didn't have to constantly be worked on by my body freed up a lot of resources in my body to help my mind. The things that weren't going completely right, I can't necessarily blame on the things that were going totally wrong in my body, but fixing some of it helped fix more of it. Because healing begets healing. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, especially as we start going into this winter, as we start to find ourselves questioning what we've been doing for so many months of this year, and as we go into the next year wondering why it's not ending yet, and as it does end and wondering where our place is in this world as we continue moving on from where we were, getting to where we're going, which isn't a true destination. There's no end in sight for any of this, because the adventure is just going to keep going on and on. And that's important to remember. This new normal, going back to the old ways, whatever you want to think of it as, it's just like working out. It's going to take a lot of change to see any change at all. The subtlety in the things that we're doing are going to be harder and harder to notice the more and more we do them. The death cap mushrooms are going to spring up. The turkeys are still going to run across the yard. I'm going to try and start working out, probably. But as we face these new things that show them to us, show themselves to us every day, we have to understand nothing's ever going to be the same. But that's no different than it was before. Thanks for hanging out. My name is Supe.
fly over the Atlantic.